My name's Elizabeth and I'm one of the 3 law tutors here at Mansfield. I teach trusts, land law and Roman law. My colleague Andrew teaches tort and one of the optional 3rd year modules, and my colleague Pavlos teaches constitutional law, jurisprudence and EU law. I hope you're watching this video because you're thinking of applying to Mansfield for law. Excellent, we would love to see an application from you. At Mansfield, we're looking for the same things in an application for law as the other colleges are. You can see the selection criteria on the law faculty website, and they are application, reasoning ability and communication. Application is motivation and capacity for sustained and intense work. The Oxford Law degree is intense. What we want is someone who is really keen to engage with law as an academic subject. As a law student here, you're constantly reading, researching, listening, analysing, writing. You're going to be observing, evaluating and thinking. So we get you reading a case report and then you put it next to another case and you think, well, why did those come out differently? Should they have done? Do I agree? What do I think? You read an article or you go to a lecture where someone tells you the story that they think the cases amount to and where we should go in the future, and you think, are they right? Do I agree? What reasoning is better in this scenario? And then you come to a tutorial and your tutor asks you, what do you think of the reasoning underlying these cases? Is it consistent? Is it good? What about this legislation? Is the policy behind it sound? Is it well expressed? Is it doing a good job? What do you think? You can see from that why we're looking for reasoning ability. We don't expect you to know exactly what to think about from the start. That's what the degree's for. But we do want people who are getting into engaging in the sort of reasoning that we see in law. One of the main skills is identifying and drawing legally relevant distinctions, the distinctions that should matter in coming to different legal conclusions. So if you think of an example, if there were 2 car accidents on the same stretch of road, it doesn't matter in a legal sense what the colours of those cars were, if one of them was blue and the other was green. But it may very well matter from a legal point of view if one driver was using their headlights and the other wasn't and it was dark, and so on and so forth. If you find that you're curious about the reasoning behind rules, if you like to know not just the solution to a problem but why someone thinks their answer is right, then you are probably starting to think in the right sort of way. And if you enjoy thinking in that sort of way, then we want to hear from you. Communication is the 3rd one, and that is the willingness and ability to express ideas clearly and effectively, the ability to listen, and the ability to give considered responses. What I do want to stress here is that there is absolutely no need for any applicant to be a confident public speaker. So long as you're happy to talk about your ideas in an ordinary conversational way, that's enough. In tutorials we discuss, so I might put forward an idea or a case reading, you might ask questions to help you understand why I'm doing that, then you might come back and argue that in fact you think these other factors are more important and why. We might go on and work on that together. We might look at possible counter-arguments. I might say to you, well, how would you respond to those? How would you go about formulating a rule that would better reflect the policy arguments you've put forward? Is it possible to formulate a coherent rule that does what you want in the law and does it well? A tutorial isn't adversarial, it isn't a competition or a performance, it's just a discussion between people who all want to get a better understanding of what the law is and what the law should be and why. We sit together and we work on the problems that the law puts to us. Communication covers not just verbal communication but writing as well. So for example, when you write your LNAT essay, you're going to want to think about what you can do to show that you're listening to the question that's been asked and to make sure that you're expressing your ideas clearly and effectively when you respond to it. So how do we go about assessing applications for the law course? When we see an application, we see all the components. So we have the UCAS form, grades achieved to date, the contextualisation information for the grades, the personal statement, the grade predictions, the tutor's reference. We also have the LNAT multiple choice test result and the LNAT essay, which we mark ourselves in Oxford. And that gives us a lot of material from which we can make a holistic assessment of each candidate in terms of those 3 things: application, reasoning ability and communication. So the candidates we call for interview are the ones whose applications we think demonstrate the strongest potential across those admissions criteria. And at the interview again, we try to assess those 3 criteria. So in Mansfield, when we interview, we usually ask our candidates to go through a short piece of reading before we start, and then we ask questions about it and discuss it in the style of a tutorial. The interview gives us some additional information to take back into a holistic assessment of all the candidates we've interviewed, and then to determine which candidates have demonstrated most strength across those criteria, taking into account everything we know about them, not just the interview. The interview is just a part of assessing how somebody has demonstrated strength. What does that mean? It means that you do not need perfect grades to apply. You don't need to be confident that you're going to absolutely ace the LNAT. You don't need to look at those admissions criteria and think, yep, I already have all of those things. It's easy to get carried away and think that there'll be loads of perfect candidates, and that's really not the case. If you look at those admissions criteria and you think, that's something I'd like to do, I can see why that would make me a better law student, those are things I want to work on, I think that's all I could have said when I was in your position and thinking about applying for Oxford. If you love reading and writing, if it sounds exciting to you to do a degree where you're being intellectually challenged all the time, working on understanding and evaluating and arguing about the law, looking at reasoning, thinking logically, thinking creatively, looking at problems, why they are problems, what kinds of solutions we can find, working on communicating as well as you can about it, then I would say you should be thinking seriously about applying. At Mansfield in particular, we organise the teaching for the course in a similar way to other colleges. So in the first 2 terms you take Roman law, constitutional law and criminal law, and then you take your first year exams. After that there are 7 terms before final exams, and you take the remaining 7 core subjects and 2 options. Some of the teaching is done in Mansfield with me, Andrew and Pavlos, and some of it is done by tutors in other colleges. The workload is 1.5 subjects per term, so that's usually 3 tutorials a fortnight, so 3 pieces of written work a fortnight, and that makes 12 essays in an 8-week term. An essay is usually around 1,500 words. That's really why I say that the law degree is best suited to people who love reading and writing, or who at least are prepared to spend a lot of time doing it. No one expects perfection in a tutorial essay at all, and they don't count towards your final result. But writing those essays and discussing them with your tutor is really important in developing your ideas and your ability to put together a good argument clearly and persuasively. One of the best things about my job is that my students don't just learn law, they learn about how they can get better at studying law and arguing and writing about it in their own way, and they get better at that every term. Oxford puts a lot of emphasis on independent study and learning, and that might seem intimidating at first. When I was doing law at Oxford, I remember thinking in my first term, well, I did not know this was even a thing before I saw the reading list, and now I have to write an essay and have an opinion and talk about that in a tutorial. But tutors know that. They know what you're working with, and they just want you to succeed and to get better at studying the subject that they love teaching. It's amazing for me to see students go from thinking they can't do it to knowing they can do it. I don't think anyone arrives at Oxford thinking they can write a perfect essay. I don't think there is a perfect essay. One of the things I most enjoy seeing at Mansfield is a student getting confidence to develop their own voice in their essays, to decide on how they want to organise the material, to judge for themselves which arguments are the strongest, which arguments they need to consider but still show why they're staying with their own view nonetheless, and why. I love it when I see my students working out their own response to the question they've been asked, even if it's not the one that most people would give. I love discussing the cases and arguments in tutorials and learning from the way my students have approached the material and how they've thought about it and what arguments they're now seeing as the most relevant and the strongest, and why. A lot of students worry about making mistakes, but mistakes are part of learning. It's an opportunity to learn from that mistake and to learn more about law and how you think about it. It might turn out that you haven't made a mistake at all. You've just said something new and different that needs more explanation. That's not wrong. That's awesome. Finally, I want to say something about my college. I love Mansfield because it's so friendly and down to earth. Everyone's very approachable, no one stands on ceremony. I think we have a great sense of community and working together to teach and research and learn as well as we possibly can, just because we love our subjects and we want everyone to share that with us. On top of all of that, we have cats. For law specifically, I will also point out that we're nice and close to the law faculty for the lectures and the Bodleian Law Library. We also have a wonderful law library in college, which our librarians keep stocked with the books that our students use most often. At Mansfield, we have 3 law tutors looking after around 8 undergraduates in a year, so there's always someone around to help you if you run into a problem. And if none of that has persuaded you, then you should come to Mansfield just so that you can see my Roman law props collection. I am probably the only law tutor in Oxford who teaches Roman law using chocolate coins, and if you want to see how that works, you need to apply to my college. I hope this has been helpful. I have very much enjoyed talking to you. Thank you.